They tell you change takes time, that it's slow, gradual, something that happens in tiny, invisible steps. That's only half the truth, because sometimes it only takes one decision, one, not 10, not 100, not some a day. Just one moment where you stop and choose differently. And that moment, it doesn't look powerful from the outside. No fireworks, no applause, no dramatic music playing in the background. Just silence. A quiet war inside your mind where two voices are fighting. One says, stay where you are. It's safer here. Don't risk it. What if you fail? The other one, it doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It just asks one question. What if you don't? And right there, in that fragile second, you decide. You either follow the same path you've walked 1,000 times, or you take a step that feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable, even terrifying. That step is the decision. And here's what nobody tells you. The decision itself is more powerful than the outcome. People think success changes lives. No, decisions do. Because success is just a delayed result, but the decision. That's the moment everything shifts. Think about it. Every negative feeling you've ever had, fear, doubt, anger, regret, they don't just appear out of nowhere. They build patterns. You wake up thinking the same thoughts. You react the same way. You tell yourself the same story. I'm not ready. I can't do this. This is just who I am. And day by day, those thoughts become your reality. Not because they're true, but because you never challenge them. Until one day, you do. You interrupt the pattern. Maybe it's small. You speak when you usually stay quiet. You try when you usually quit. You stand still when your instinct is to run. From the outside, it looks insignificant. But inside, it's chaos. Because your old self, the one built on fear and hesitation, doesn't know how to react. You broke the script. And once the script is broken, it can't control you the same way again. That's the real power of one decision. It doesn't just change what you do. It changes who you are becoming. Let's be honest. Negative feelings don't disappear just because you decide something once. They come back. Again and again. They test you. They whisper. That decision didn't mean anything. You're still the same. Go back to what's familiar. And this is where most people lose. They think one decision should fix everything instantly. When it doesn't, they give up. But that's the trap. The decision isn't magic. It's a door. And when you walk through it, you don't enter comfort. You enter resistance. Because growth, real growth, always feels like something is breaking. And it is. Old habits, old beliefs, old versions of you. They don't leave quietly. They fight. They pull you back into the same cycles, the same emotions, the same excuses. But now something is different. You've seen the other side. You've felt what it's like to choose differently, even for a moment. And that memory, it's dangerous. Because once you realize you have a choice, you can't pretend you don't. So the next time fear shows up, you hesitate. Not because you're weak, but because you're aware. You recognize the pattern. And that awareness gives you something you didn't have before: control. Not complete control over your emotions. No one has that. But control over your response. And that's where everything changes. You don't need to feel fearless to move forward. You just need to decide despite the fear. You don't need to silence every negative thought. You just need to stop obeying them. That's it. One decision at a time. Not perfect decisions. Not guaranteed decisions. Just real ones. The kind that feel uncomfortable. The kind that make your heart race. The kind that force you to step outside the version of yourself you've been stuck in. Because here's the truth: most people avoid your life right now is a reflection of your past decisions. Not your intentions. Not your potential. Your decisions. And if that's true, then your future, it's waiting on the next one. Not next year. Not when everything is perfect. Right now. In this moment. You're one decision away from interrupting everything that's been holding you back. One decision away from proving your negative thoughts wrong. One decision away from becoming someone your past self wouldn't recognize. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Comfort is where patterns live, where nothing changes. where negative feelings grow stronger because they're never challenged. But the moment you step out of that, even slightly, you create a crack in that reality. And through that crack, something new begins to form. Confidence. Not the loud, fake kind, the quiet kind. The kind that says, I've done this before. I can do it again. And that's how it builds, decision by decision, moment by moment, until one day you look back and realize something strange. The things that used to control you don't have the same power anymore. The fear is still there. The doubt still visits. But they're not in charge, you are. All because at some point you made one decision, a small, almost invisible move that didn't make sense to anyone else. But it broke the plan that was built to keep you stuck. And now you're not reacting anymore. You're choosing. And that's where real change begins. Your mind isn't a peaceful place. It never was. It's a battlefield. Not the kind with noise and chaos you can see, but something quieter, more dangerous. Because this war, it happens in silence. No one hears it. No one sees it. But you feel it every single day. It starts the moment you wake up, before the world even gets a chance to speak to you. Your mind already has. A thought slips in small, almost harmless. You're tired. You can't handle today. What's the point? And just like that, the battle begins. You see, most people think their problems are out there, in the world, in other people, in circumstances they can't control. But the real fight, it's inside. Because the same situation that breaks one person builds another. The difference isn't the situation. It's the mind. Your mind can be your greatest weapon or your most ruthless enemy. And here's the twist. It learns from you. Every time you avoid something out of fear, your mind remembers. Every time you give in to doubt, it records that. Every time you tell yourself, I can't, it believes you. Not because it's against you, but because it's following your lead. That's how the battlefield gets shaped. Not overnight, but through repetition, thought by thought, reaction by reaction, until one day you're not even questioning it anymore. The negative voice becomes familiar, comfortable. It feels like truth. You're not good enough. You always mess things up. You'll never change. And the worst part, you stop fighting. You accept it. You call it reality. But it's not reality. It's conditioning. A pattern built from every moment you chose to believe the worst about yourself. And patterns can be broken, but not by accident, not by waiting for motivation, not by hoping things will magically feel better. This battlefield doesn't reward passivity. It rewards awareness. Because the moment you start noticing your thoughts, you create distance. That voice in your head, it's not you. It's something you've been listening to for too long. And once you realize that, everything shifts. Now when a negative thought appears, you don't immediately obey it. You question it. Is this actually true? Or is this just what I've always believed? And suddenly, the thought loses a bit of its power. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to give you a choice. That's the turning point in this battle. Not when the thoughts disappear, but when you stop treating them like commands. Because that's what they've been, haven't they? Orders. Don't try. Stay quiet. Give up. And you followed them, not because you were weak, but because you never realized you had the authority to say no. But you do. Right now, in this moment, you can hear a thought and choose not to act on it. It sounds simple, it's not. Because your mind will resist. It will get louder, more convincing, more aggressive. It will dig up your past, remind you of every mistake, every failure, every time things didn't go your way. It will say, see, this is who you are. And for a moment, you'll want to believe it. Because it's familiar. Because it's easier to stay the same than to fight for something different. But that's the illusion. This battlefield isn't about eliminating negative thoughts. It's about refusing to surrender to them. You don't need to win every fight. You just need to stay in it. One moment at a time. One decision at a time. You feel fear. Move anyway. You feel doubt. Act anyway. You feel like quitting. Stay one step longer. That's how battles are won. Not in one grand victory, but in small, consistent resistance. and slowly something starts to change. The voice that once controlled you starts to weaken. Not because it's gone, but because you've stopped feeding it. You've stopped proving it right. And in that space, a new voice begins to form. Quiet at first, uncertain, but real. It doesn't scream like the negative one. It doesn't insult you or tear you down. It just reminds you that you have options. That you're not stuck. That you're not defined by your worst thoughts. And the more you listen to that voice, the stronger it gets. Until one day, the battlefield doesn't feel the same anymore. It's still there. There are still moments of doubt. Still flashes of fear.
But now, you're not overwhelmed. You're aware.
You recognize what's happening in real time. And instead of being pulled into it, you stand your ground. That's control. Not control over every thought, but control over what you do with them. And that changes everything. Because when your actions stop being controlled by fear, your life starts to move in a different direction. You take chances you used to avoid. You speak when you used to stay silent. You try when you used to quit. Not because the fear disappeared, but because it no longer decides for you. That's what it means to win this battle. Not perfection, not constant confidence, but freedom. The freedom to think, to feel, and still choose your path. So the next time your mind turns against you, and it will, don't panic, don't run. Just remember where you are. You're on the battlefield. And for the first time, you know how to fight. Pain has a voice. Not loud, not dramatic, but persistent. It doesn't knock politely. It doesn't wait for the right time. It shows up when something is wrong. And the first instinct most people have, silence it, ignore it, distract themselves from it. Run from it as fast as possible. Because pain feels like a verdict. Like a final decision that says, this is it. This is who you are now. This is how things will always be. But that's the misunderstanding. Pain isn't a sentence. It's a signal. A message. Something trying to get your attention, not end your story. Think about it. If your body feels pain, you don't call it weakness. You don't label it failure. You recognize it as a warning. Something needs care. Something needs change. Something needs to be addressed. But when it comes to emotional pain, fear, regret, loneliness, disappointment, you treat it differently. You turn it into identity. I'm broken. I'll never recover. This is just how my life is. And just like that, a temporary signal becomes a permanent label. Not because it had to, but because you believed it. Pain is powerful like that. Not because of what it is, but because of what you make it mean. You see, pain always carries information. It tells you where something matters. It shows you where expectations didn't meet reality. It reveals what you've been avoiding, ignoring, or holding on to too tightly. But instead of listening to it, most people fight it. They try to shut it down immediately. Numb it with distractions. Cover it with noise. Replace it with anything that makes them feel less for a moment. And for a while it works. The pain fades into the background. But the signal, it never goes away. Because it hasn't been understood. It hasn't been answered. So it comes back stronger, sharper, harder to ignore. Not to punish you, but to be heard. That's where everything shifts. The moment you stop treating pain like an enemy and start seeing it as information. Not comfortable information. Not easy to process. But useful. Because every painful feeling is pointing at something. Fear points at uncertainty. Regret points at lessons. Anger points at boundaries. Sadness points at loss, or something that mattered deeply. And when you ignore those signals, you stay stuck. Not because pain is holding you there, but because you're refusing to understand what it's trying to tell you. But when you face it, when you sit with it without immediately trying to escape, something unexpected happens. It changes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually. Because pain loses its power when it's no longer misunderstood. You start asking different questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this showing me? Not, how do I get rid of this feeling? But, what needs to change because of it? And those questions, they turn pain into direction. Instead of something that stops you, it becomes something that guides you. But let's be clear, That doesn't make it easy. Feeling pain without running from it? That takes strength. Because your instinct will still be to escape, to distract yourself, to avoid thinking about it, to push it down and pretend it's not there. And sometimes you will. That's part of it. But the difference now is awareness. You know it's not a sentence. You know it's not defining your future. It's just a signal waiting to be understood. So you come back to it again and again, not to suffer, but to learn. And slowly, you begin to respond differently. You don't let fear stop you completely. You don't let regret trap you in the past. You don't let anger control your actions. You listen, but you don't obey blindly. That's the balance. Because pain isn't meant to control you. It's meant to inform you, to highlight what matters, to reveal where growth is needed, to push you towards something better, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And over time, you start noticing something. The same things that once felt unbearable become manageable, not because they disappeared, but because you understand them. You've taken the signal and turned it into action, into change, into awareness. And that's when pain stops feeling like a dead end and starts feeling like a turning point. Because every time you face it instead of running, you prove something to yourself. You're not controlled by what you feel. You're shaped by how you respond to it. And that changes everything. So the next time pain shows up, don't rush to silence it. Don't immediately label it as something negative that needs to be erased. Pause. Listen. Not for comfort, but for clarity. Because hidden inside that discomfort is a message you've been avoiding. And that message, it's not there to break you. It's there to guide you toward a version of yourself that only exists on the other side of understanding it. Pain is not the end. It's the signal that something needs to change. And once you see it that way, you stop fearing it. You start using it. And that's when it loses its power to define you and becomes something far more valuable direction. Chaos has a reputation. People hear the word and think of destruction, loss, everything falling apart at once. Something to avoid, something to control, something to run from as fast as possible. And most of the time, that's exactly what they do. The moment life stops making sense, the moment emotions get heavy, the moment things don't go according to plan, they panic. They try to fix it immediately, silence it, escape it, because chaos feels like danger. It feels like losing control. But here's what most people never realize. Chaos isn't just destruction. It's interruption. It's what happens when the old structure can't hold anymore. And that's not always a bad thing. Think about it. Every pattern you've been stuck in, every negative cycle, every limiting belief, they all depend on stability, predictability, repetition. They survive because nothing challenges them. Nothing shakes them. Nothing forces them to change. But chaos doesn't ask for permission. It shows up uninvited and starts breaking things. Plans fall apart. Expectations collapse. Comfort disappears. And in that moment, it feels like everything is going wrong. But look closer. What's actually breaking? Is it your life or the illusion of control you thought you had? Because sometimes the things that fall apart were never strong enough to carry you forward. They were just familiar. Habits that kept you safe, but small. Thoughts that felt true, but limited. Routines that felt comfortable, but stagnant. And chaos. It disrupts all of it. Suddenly, you can't rely on the same patterns anymore. The old way of thinking doesn't work. The usual reactions don't feel right. The identity you've been holding onto starts to crack. And that's where the opportunity is. Not in the chaos itself, but in what it exposes. Because when everything is stable, you don't question much. You go through the motions. You repeat what you know. You stay inside the lines. But when chaos hits, you're forced to pay attention. You're forced to adapt. You're forced to decide who you are without the safety of routine. And that's powerful. Uncomfortable, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But powerful. Because in chaos, you're no longer locked into your old identity. You're not just the person who always plays it safe, or the one who always doubts, or the one who always quits. Those versions of you depended on stability, on predictable conditions, on a controlled environment. Take that away, and suddenly you're something else, undefined. And most people hate that feeling. They rush to rebuild the same old structure, the same habits, the same mindset, because at least it's familiar, even if it holds them back. But if you pause, if you resist the urge to immediately fix everything, you start to see something different. Chaos creates space. Space where the old rules don't apply. Space where you can choose differently. Space where you can rebuild not what you had, but what you actually need. That's the hidden power. Not in controlling chaos, but in using it. Letting it strip away what no longer serves you. Letting it challenge the beliefs you never questioned. Letting it push you into decisions you would have avoided in comfort. Because let's be honest, you don't grow the most when everything is going perfectly. You grow when things don't make sense. When you're forced to figure it out. When you're pushed beyond what feels safe. When the path disappears and you have to create your own. That's chaos. And it's not your enemy. It's a test. Not of how perfectly you can handle everything, but of how willing you are to evolve. Because in chaos, you don't have the luxury of staying the same. You either adapt, or you fall back into something that no longer fits. An adaptation, that's where your power is. Not loud, not obvious, but real. It's in the moment you decide, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I'm not going back to who I was. It's in the moment you stop trying to control everything and start focusing on what you can do next. It's in the moment you realize that uncertainty doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're no longer confined. And that changes everything. Because once you stop fearing chaos, you stop being controlled by it. You start moving through it instead of running from it. You start seeing opportunities where others see only problems. You start building something new, while everything else is still falling apart. And that's when it becomes clear, chaos isn't just destruction. It's transformation in its rawest form. Messy, unpredictable, uncomfortable, but necessary. Because without it, you'd still be stuck in the same patterns, the same mindset, the same version of yourself that never had a reason to change. So the next time things feel like they're falling apart, don't rush to put everything back the way it was. Ask yourself something different. What is this breaking and why? What is this showing me that I refused to see before? What can I build now that the old structure is gone? Because hidden inside that chaos is a version of you that only shows up when everything else disappears. Stronger, more aware, less dependent on comfort, and far more dangerous to the limits that once defined you. You don't need to control the chaos. You just need to stop wasting it. Use it, shape it. Let it force you into a move you never would have made in calm conditions. Because sometimes, the moment everything breaks is the exact moment you finally become something more. They thought they had you figured out. Every habit mapped out, every reaction predicted, every weakness accounted for. You wake up at the same time, think the same thoughts, make the same excuses, hesitate at the same moments. It's almost mechanical, like a game that's already been solved. And in that system, you're not a threat. You're predictable, safe, contained. Because as long as you follow the pattern, nothing changes. Not your results, not your mindset, not your position in the world. Everything stays exactly where it is supposed to be. That's how the plan holds. Not through force, but through repetition. Through the quiet agreement you've made with your own limits. I don't do that. I'm not that type of person. This is just how I am. The statements that sound harmless, but act like walls. They keep you inside a version of yourself that's already been defined, already been measured, already been predicted. And here's the uncomfortable truth. As long as you stay inside that version, you'll never surprise anyone. Not the world. Not your circumstances, not even yourself. Because you're moving exactly how everything expects you to move. But then something shifts, not outside, inside. A moment where you pause it and notice the pattern. Really notice it. The same hesitation. The same retreat. The same silent agreement with fear. And for the first time, you don't follow it. You hesitate, but not in the same way. Not the kind that pulls you back. The kind that creates space, a gap between the thought and the action. And inside that gap, you realize something dangerous. You have options. You're not locked into the next move. You've just been repeating it. And that realization, that's where everything begins to change. Because now you're no longer automatic. You're aware, and awareness breaks predictability. The next time fear shows up, it expects the usual response. Step back. Stay quiet. Play safe. But instead, you lean forward, not perfectly, not confidently, but differently. And that difference, it doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be real. You speak when you usually stay silent. You try when you usually avoid. You continue when you usually quit. From the outside, it might look small, almost insignificant. But inside the system that once defined you, it's disruption. Because the plan, the one built on your past behavior, it didn't account for this version of you. The version that questions instead of obeys. The version that chooses instead of reacts. That's the unexpected move. And here's the part most people miss. Being the unexpected move doesn't mean becoming someone completely different overnight. It means doing something your old self wouldn't do. That's it. One action that breaks the pattern. Because patterns rely on consistency. They need you to repeat the same choices over and over again. The moment you interrupt that, even once, the pattern weakens. And once it weakens, it can't control you the same way again. But it won't give up easily. Your mind will try to pull you back. This isn't you. You're forcing it. Go back to what's comfortable. And comfort will feel tempting. Because it's familiar. Because it requires less effort. Because it keeps everything predictable. But predictable is exactly what kept you stuck. So now you have a choice. Return to the pattern or continue being the disruption. And disruption, it's uncomfortable. It feels unnatural at first. Like you're stepping into something you haven't fully earned yet. But that feeling, that's not a sign to stop. That's proof you're outside the script. Because if it felt normal, it would mean nothing changed. So you keep going. One unexpected move at a time. Not trying to prove anything to anyone, but refusing to go back to automatic living. You start noticing things, opportunities you ignored before, strengths you never used, moments where you actually have control, even when it doesn't feel like it. And slowly, the identity you've been carrying begins to shift, not through words, but through actions. Because you're no longer the person who always hesitates. You're the one who acts despite hesitation. You're no longer the person who avoids risk. You're the one who steps into it carefully, but willingly. You're no longer the person defined by past behavior. You're the one rewriting it in real time. And that changes how everything responds to you. Situations that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Decisions that once felt impossible become options. Because you're no longer predictable. You're adaptable. And adaptability, that's power. Not loud power, not obvious power, but the kind that shifts outcomes. The kind that opens paths where there used to be walls. All because you stopped moving the way you always have. So the next time you feel that familiar pull, that instinct to retreat, to doubt, to stay inside the lines, pause, recognize it, and then ask yourself, what would the old version of me do? And then don't do that. Do something else. Something small, something uncomfortable, something real. Because you don't need a perfect plan. You just need a different move. And that move, the one that breaks the pattern, the one that disrupts the script, that move is you. Not the version you've been repeating, but the one you've been avoiding. The one that doesn't wait for permission. The one that doesn't follow expectations. The one that creates change instead of reacting to it. They didn't plan for that version of you. They couldn't, because that version only shows up when you decide to stop being predictable. And the moment you do, everything shifts. Not all at once, not perfectly, but permanently. Because once you become the unexpected move, you can't go back to being part of the plan. There's a story playing in your head right now. You didn't write it all at once. It wasn't handed to you in a neat little book. It built itself slowly, quietly, over time. Every mistake you made added a line. Every time someone doubted you added a chapter. Every moment you felt small, ignored, or defeated. It all stitched together into something that feels permanent, a narrative. And the dangerous part, you don't question it anymore. You repeat it. I'm just not confident. I always mess things up. People like me don't succeed. You say it so often it starts to feel like truth. But let's be clear about something. That story, it's not truth. It's interpretation. A version of events filtered through emotion, fear, and repetition. And here's where it gets interesting. Your mind doesn't care if the story is accurate. It only cares if it's consistent. So if you've been telling yourself for years that you're not enough, your mind will find evidence to support it. It will highlight your failures, ignore your progress, twist neutral moments into proof that you're stuck, not because it hates you, but because it's trying to stay loyal to the narrative you've been feeding it. That's how powerful a story is. It shapes what you see, what you believe, what you expect, and eventually, what you become. Because you don't just think your story, you live it. If your narrative says you're not capable, you hesitate. If it says you're always rejected, you hold back. If it says you'll fail, you don't even try hard enough to prove it wrong. And just like that, the story keeps confirming itself. A loop, a closed system where nothing changes, because nothing is challenged. But here's the part most people avoid. You are not trapped in that story. You're just used to it. There's a difference. Being trapped means there's no way out. Being used to something means you've stopped looking for one. And the moment you realize that, you get something most people never use: authority. You have the authority to rewrite the narrative. Not by pretending your past didn't happen, not by forcing fake positivity, but by changing the meaning you give to it. That failure you keep replaying. It can mean, I'm not good enough, or it can mean, I learned something most people avoid. That rejection. It can mean, I'll never be chosen, or it can mean, that wasn't where I belonged. Same events, different story, different outcome. But here's the catch. Rewriting your narrative isn't comfortable, because the old story, even if it hurts, is familiar. It's predictable. It gives you a strange sense of control. You already know how it ends. But a new story, that's uncertain. It forces you to step into something you haven't proven yet. And your mind, it doesn't like uncertainty. It will resist. It will whisper. Who do you think you are? This isn't you. You're lying to yourself. And for a moment, it will feel true, because you're stepping outside of the identity you've repeated for so long. But that discomfort, that's not a sign you're wrong. That's a sign you're changing. Because rewriting a narrative means becoming someone unfamiliar before it feels natural. It means catching yourself in the middle of an old thought and interrupting it. I always fail. No, that didn't work, but I'm still here. I'm not confident. No, I'm learning to trust myself step by step. At first it feels forced, like you're arguing with your own mind, because you are. You're challenging years of repetition, years of belief, years of evidence your mind has collected to keep you exactly where you are. So don't expect it to be easy. But understand this. Every time you interrupt the old story,